Well, hey everybody, this is Bishop Stan, and this is kind of exciting. This is an early setup for my new video ministry. I'm going to have consistent, consistent videos. Hopefully this time. Been on a wild adventure for the last year or so, ever since COVID, even before then. But a lot of really fantastic things have happened. And so I'm starting a catechism. I'm putting together a bunch of videos to establish kind of the fundamentals of Christian thinking and the Christian faith. And so before I get into all the details, I think it's pretty important to talk about thinking and how you think. And a big part of the life of a disciple of Christ, is not just being a learner, but also being a doer. We're going to talk about the being a learner part. And a lot of this really comes down to learning the teachings of Christ and the teachings of God in the scriptures, and also the teachings of the church, which help you interpret what is being said. But it is amazing to me how many people get in a lot of problems, and especially today, where you will read stuff and people will clip this Bible verse and that Bible verse. And I've even looked through a lot of kind of scholarly stuff, and where they'll have this Bible verse is supposed to prove something, and then you look up the reference and it's totally wrong. It doesn't have anything to do with anything. But really, a lot of success in life really comes down to a command of the fundamentals. Now, a catechism means a course, and a catechist is the teacher, and the catechumen are the students. And it's usually used in the Christian context of a new believers class, or a Christian education class. In some Protestant churches, they can be fairly quick, 6 or 8 churches. And a lot of Orthodox churches, they can be quite a while. It can almost be like an AA degree. My friend Pavel, when he was young, I remember when he was studying for his catechism, he was 12 years old, and it really was like an associate's degree. He really had to do a lot of work. He said he actually had to do, it was tougher than his master's degree program. But why not? Why shouldn't it be? You know, you're learning about yourself, you're learning about God, you're learning about the world, you're learning about life, you're learning about whatever matters. And so what I want to talk about is something that I didn't get in any church, and I didn't get from the Bible, but it's very useful. When I was in 6th grade, my 6th grade teacher was Mrs. Urseth. And she, teachers in those days are not like today. They're pretty loose today. Back then, they never talked about their families very much, or their own personal ideas. It wasn't their job. Their job was to cover the reading, writing, arithmetic, art, and that kinds of stuff. It wasn't supposed to be to give you their opinions on everything. But she actually did tell us some really good stories. So one of those stories was her father, and her father ran for governor of a big state. I think it was like Nebraska, or I think it was Omaha. I think it was Omaha. Not Omaha's not a state. I think it was Nebraska. And he lost it by only 150 votes for the whole state. And so she starts off by saying, who thinks your votes matter? And everyone raised their hands. And we, okay, yeah, but maybe not really. And so she told that story, and it really stuck with me. And she said at the time, your vote really matters. Your vote, just 150 votes, would have made my father the governor and changed everything for the state. And that really stuck with me. The power of one person to follow God, one person to do what's right. I mean, Jesus took the world and shook it like a carpet with only 12 people. And that really stuck with me. Another thing she talked about, she said that her dad was a newspaper reporter. And so she talked about the 5W's. Now, I thought that her father invented it because I was just 10 years old at the time. And maybe I was 11, 10 years old at the time. And so she said the 5W's. And she said her father was a newspaper reporter, and they always focused on the 5W's. Who, what, why, where, and when. The 5W's. Who, what, why, where, and when. those are really critical, especially in reading the scriptures. As I learned later in life, her father did not invent that. That was done by Aristotle. But if you have a command of the 5W's, it's going to give you a very strong ability to be able to interpret the scriptures. Now, the scriptures are not a matter of private interpretation. The scriptures tell us they are interpreted by the entire church. And so it's good to hear what other people have to say. It's kind of foolish to think that you're the only smart person out there. There's plenty of smart people out there. And over the last 2,000 years, there's been a lot of very holy, very smart people, and they have some pretty impressive things to say. I don't speak, I don't speak and write easily Greek, English, Hebrew, and Aramaic, but a lot of those guys did. And a lot of them had pretty big galaxy brains. So it's good to learn who, what, why, where, and when. And so this is especially important in parts of the scriptures which are story oriented. The Gospels are story oriented. Not all of the Pentateuch or the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible are, but Genesis is especially story oriented. The histories can be story oriented. Less so like the Psalms. The Psalms are not really in an order that tells a story. The book of Proverbs, for instance, is not a story. It's a collection of sayings, and it's a collection of advice, sometimes ironic statements about life, like if you correct a wise man, then he'll grow from that. But if you hit a fool on the head 100 times with a stick, he's still not going to learn anything. Those kinds of things. So one thing that you'll see a lot stands corollary to the 5 rules, who, what, why, where, and when, is 1, read around the scripture. It's amazing how many people will try and clip a whole verse into half a verse. They'll clip something out of its context, and all you have to do is just read the chapter and you'll be able to see the context. So for instance, here's a great one. If you pray believing you receive, you shall have it. But that's not what the verse says. Before that it says, if you bear the Father much fruit. So lots of people were clipping that part out. It is not false, but it's false in context. If you bear the Father fruit. So that actually becomes important. That completely redefines it. So Hebrews, for instance, is less of a story. It's more about doctrine. Some of the epistles, a lot of the epistles are about doctrine and advice and interpretations of things. But generally speaking, those 5 things are going to really straighten a lot of stuff out, because people will quite often take lots of stuff out of context. Context is king. Context is key. It establishes everything. And without the context, it's just easy to make lies out of things. The other thing is that the story parts of the Bible, like especially Genesis, they happen in a sequence. And you have to really follow that sequence and understand the story. At the time of Jesus, all the Jews really knew the Old Testament backwards and forwards and sideways and underneath. All you had to do was just make a reference to something and they know it. So in the greatest commandment, for instance, talking about taking things out of context, you'll have stuff, the Shema. Hear ye, O Israel, the Lord God is one. Love the Lord with all your heart, all your mind, and all your strength. And then Jesus says the second commandment is in likeness with the first. But that first part of the Shema, hear ye, O Israel, the second verse right after that says, therefore, teach it to your children, coming and going, in the house and in the field. Bind it to their hands, bind it to their heads. In other words, really pound it into them. They got to know this stuff, because life is about this. So that becomes tied in with love. Well, now there's a larger context. So context is really key. Bishop Stand's corollary number 1 is read around the scriptures. You got to read around it. Don't just take some verse. The verse may sound pretty, but it also might be wrong, or it might be wrongly applied. Another corollary is to take a look at a story, but take a look at the whole story. So if somebody is quoting something from Abraham, for instance, you have to think about the whole story. So because if you don't, then you'll actually potentially lose a lot of context. And those things are told as in the format of a story for a reason. Now, when I say a story, it doesn't mean that I say that it's not true. It is true. But the format of it isn't a story. Well, a movie's a story. Lots of things are a story. When people tell, the parts and pieces about their life, it's a story. It doesn't mean it's not true. It just means that that's the format. This thing happened, and then that thing happened, and then the other thing happened, and then the next thing happened. And so understanding all of that is really very crucial. So anyhow, here's episode 1 on my crude setup with my new equipment while I still figure everything else out. God bless, and let us grab our crosses and go forward with Christ.